We talking about how many times have we done this?
There isn't a human being on Earth right now who's had less than 400 lifetimes. The average human being is older than 1,000,000 years.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being here in those conditions. So, David Suich, everyone, he is or was a senior engineer. I want to bring this up. I would say grounded in logic. I think that's important for this conversation. He was in chronic pain. He was depressed, which led him to a YouTube video about an atheist who died and went to heaven. And that one video, little did he know it, probably launched him on an 18-year journey that he probably didn't think was going to happen.
No.
He is now a spiritual counselor. He's the author of God Took My Clothes. I have his book here. Highly recommend. I'm going to leave everything in the notes down below. And he's here to talk to us about what he's learned from interviewing over 1,200 people who have died, went to the other side, and came back. So I'm very excited to have you here. Truthfully, I got to tell you, David, NDEs played a massive role in my kind of journey as a whole, and pretty obviously played a big role in yours as well. So
Oh, yes.
excited that we're here. Thanks for being here, man.
It's a pleasure to be here on the show. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So to kick things off, I kind of want to start with, I guess, the religion aspect. So you said that you no longer have faith in God because faith implies uncertainty. And you say you know now. So I kind of want to ask you, like, what was that moment for you that changed everything from like a belief to a knowing? Like, what is your paradigm experience, if you will?
Really, it kind of happened suddenly when I clicked on that first YouTube video. Now, this was 2007,
Okay.
and back then, YouTube was only a couple years old, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was pretty rare to be able to find a video on YouTube. I would search every day after that first video, and I might find one or two a month. And now there's more channels. I mean, you've interviewed, I don't know how many people on your channel who have had near-death experiences, so there's more channels that I can keep track of. But that first video is what kind of opened my eyes. It was this atheist who was this kind of militant tyrant. Some of you may know whose experience, Howard Storm. You know, there's a person like this in every group, you know, slam their fist and yelling, you know, one of these people. And he would argue with his students. He was an art professor, and he would tell his Christian students that they're crazy, or anybody who believed in God, you know, you're delusional and that kind of thing. And he described this afterlife experience. And I had had training as part of my job. I was a sales engineer selling power plants. And this guy did not display any of the signs of lying. As a matter of fact, it was the exact opposite. He was very sincere. And what he said just blew my mind, because I was under the impression of what religion taught me, which this is a pass-fail test. And he gets to heaven, and he's going towards this beautiful place, and he looks at it and thinks, well, they've made a mistake. You know, I'm garbage, filth, scum. I don't belong in that pure place. I was this horrible person telling people don't believe in God. Here, there's an afterlife, you know. And they stopped, and he was with Jesus, who's not quite like the Jesus of the Bible. He's kind of the core of God that acts as an advocate for human beings. And he said to him, we don't make mistakes. You belong here in heaven with us. And it was at that moment that it hit me like a ton of bricks. No, God never abandoned me. He never stopped loving me. If he loved this guy, of course he loves me. And that was kind of the big moment. And I had about a month where I was kind of a basket case, crying and tears of joy. And it started my NDE research. And I haven't done the 1,200 testimonies personal interviews. Some of the interviews I do personally, but others are interviews from others that will send me a written testimony or audio or something like that. So, but I have heard, somewhere around the neighborhood of 1,300 testimonies.
I mean, that is not everyone does that, David. They hear something, it changes, and they go, oh, I'm going to go do like this massive, like you said, 18-long journey. So it definitely, I would imagine it had a pretty massive role in you. How do you explain to people, or I guess I'm curious on your explanation, when you hear people say like, oh, it's just it's your brain releasing DMT or whatever they think it is. Like, it's been proven. Like, how do you come at that? Because I know in your book you also said it's not if you find yourself on the other side of arguing your belief system, you're on the wrong side. I really like that you said that. But
yes.
How do you kind of respond to that, or do you not respond to that?
My response is, okay, that's a valid perspective. You know, if they want to ask me about it, or if it's a legitimate question, how do you justify? I'll answer. But, you know, heaven's real clear. If you're arguing trying to prove that you're right, trying to prove the other person's wrong, trying to act superior, you're on the wrong side of the equation. That's not love. And so, people have come back from their near death experiences and, they say, well, what am I going to tell my husband who's an atheist, or what am I going to tell my best friend who's doesn't believe this stuff, or they're in this religion with all these messed up ideas that are not aligned with what, and they say, well, they're where they're supposed to be. Leave them alone.
I love that. So
So
you don't engage in an argument with those kind of people.
no, if they
Yeah.
legitimately want to know, I mean, I'll give them an answer, which is, I've taken DMT, and for those who don't know in the audience, that's dimethyltryptamine. It's the active ingredient in ayahuasca, so it's a very psychedelic experience. It makes drugs like LSD or magic mushrooms look like a walk in the park. It's nothing like the near-death experience. And so some people will say it's a trick of the dying brain. I watched this BBC documentary where they talked about, well, the cones of your vision die from the outside, and then the ones in the center are last, so it looks like this tunnel forming. And then the feel-good feelings that they report, are because your brain releases all the serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin it has at once when you die, so you have these feel-good feelings. Well, that may explain some near-death experiences where they see a light go through a tunnel and then they're back. It doesn't explain the more extensive ones where they come into the light and they meet this being of light, and they don't have to be told it's God. It's, the universe reverberates his name. It's just obvious that this is the creator. And they describe a feeling of familiarity. This is where I came from. Oh, yes, I remember I was just having a temporary adventure there on Earth. There's no doubt in their minds. Let's put it this way. Is there any doubt in your mind? You have the world where you go to sleep and you have dreams and things happen, and then you have the world during the day where things are happening. Do you doubt which world is the real world, your dream world or the daytime world? Does anybody doubt what? No. It is obvious. So it is much like waking up from a dream. They report feeling more real, more alive than they've ever felt in their lives. Just the height of existence, just filled up with life. And many of them don't have any questions because they say they're connected to universal consciousness. Some have very long conversations with the being of light. So nothing anybody's ever tried to explain to dismiss it has been valid enough or has made enough sense for me to doubt what I've learned.
I love it. I've also taken DMT twice. One was a good experience. One was a terrible experience.
It'll give you the experience you need. So
for sure. I do think drugs, though, substances in general, they gave me a reference point, right? So when I've had kind of my own out-of-body experiences, if I hadn't taken those things, I don't think I would. Yeah, I wouldn't know anything different, right? It's like I've taken a lot, all the way up to DMT, like you said, and it's up there as the granddaddy, probably only by ayahuasca is the big dog. And this is nothing like that, or some of these experiences I've had without any drugs. Totally different.
Yes. And
Totally
it's
different.
interesting that you mentioned psychedelics because those are kind of almost a window into the divine. They're meant as a learning tool. They're not meant to be abused as a party drug. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just not the proper use of it. And then if you use psychedelics for spiritual advancement, there's only so much you can learn. And then you'll get to a point where I did, for instance, and many other spiritual people have gotten to where they say, well, I've learned all I can. And my spiritual guides were very clear saying, you need to leave that behind in your past. You're not going to learn anything else from it. And so I did. But they're a tool, and you can certainly learn things. One of the near-death experience testimonies I heard was not from a man who had any sort of medical emergency. He had taken 1,000 hits of LSD. Oh. And of course, he left his body and got to heaven. And they said, "Oh, well, we're happy to see you here, but we don't want you to abuse your body like that again. It's not good for you." And they sent him back, and said, "Don't probably be a good idea not to do that again." So
that's funny, actually. Do you have any insight on if specific ones are for specific lessons? Those tools, meaning like mushrooms, psilocybin. I think you feel a lot of like, oh, we are one with the earth. Like that's the lesson I get when I take that. DMT, I'm trying to recall what I definitely got a message of love. That's for sure. I left that feeling like, whoa, love is the answer. Do you have any other insights on whether certain psychedelics are meant for certain things or not really?
Well, each psychedelic will have a different effect. And so drugs like psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, that is a very grounding to nature type experience. So if you take a light dose of psilocybin, something like 1 or 1.5 grams of dried shrooms, not enough to hallucinate, and then you spend some time in nature, it's going to look like a garden paradise. Yeah. And I think that's the way it always is supposed to look. We just are so used to it, we don't see it that way. So it helps us recognize things. It was on an LSD trip in my younger days when I was experimenting with psychedelics, where I went outside and I looked at the plants in my garden and I said, oh my God, nature is alive and I've been treating it like a resource, like a thing. And so it changed my attitude towards nature. And of course, some people who have taken high doses of LSD report feeling this universal connectedness and, love is the answer. And that was part of what spurred the flower child movement in the 1960s. Not the mainstream hippie movement, but the flower child movement, where they kind of were the first to say, well, we don't care. Interracial couples are fine. And, love is what it's all about. We probably shouldn't have this war thing. And we need to live more naturally. So there was all these sort of intrinsic truths that they became aware of. And part of that was their helper through psychedelics.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to transition back from psychedelics to NDEs here. Really want to spend some time, David, on the life reviews.
Okay.
To me, it seems like it's probably one of the more consistent things I hear about NDEs, because there's a lot of different directions they tend to go as far as who you see, what you see, but life review tends to be a common thread between a lot of them. Life review, based on your book, was definitely less about judgment, or not about judgment at all, actually, and about empathy, like radical empathy, like down to the level that you wouldn't think. I think you had stuff about a girl, or a man felt how he made a girl feel when she cried alone in her bed at night. There was, I forget if it was a man or woman, but a horse was neglected and they felt that.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
down to that
Little girl was
level where,
washing a horse. She walked away with the suds on it, and it got all itchy, and she felt that.
yeah,
What the horse
even
had to
even
suffer.
down to the stadium where it was cheering for the plant that got
For the little
watered.
plant, yeah, the guy who
Yeah, I
wanted the
mean,
plant, they cheered, yeah.
those are super interesting, because those are not your everyday things. You think about the big things, but from your experience or your knowledge of doing your research, it sounds like everything down to the little side conversation you had. You also mentioned a ripple effect. So would love to hear a little bit more about, yeah, just your thoughts on that life review and how that is kind of the crowning moment of an ND. That is like, that's the lesson, right? I mean, that's where you learn all about what you did or did not do wrong. And maybe we could dive a little deeper on anything else that you have some insights on with the life review.
Okay, sure. So for those who aren't familiar with the life review, let's just go over briefly what it is. They take you through your entire life from beginning to end. Now, some life reviews, they only go through highlights, and others, they go through every detail of their life, everything they ever said, thought, did, and felt. Now, it's not like living another 80 years over again, because there's no time in heaven. And this is something I've never understood, but they say it happens instantaneously. Some call it a panoramic life review, and some see other lifetimes. Now, when I say they take you through your life, there's a difference. So in this life, you're always one person. You see the world through your eyes, you hear through your ears, through your own perspective. And when they take you through this life review, you literally become every person you've ever interacted with. So you are you, and at the same time, you're that other person or the animal or the plant that you're interacting with. And you become that other person, and you feel from their perspective what's going on. So like the first testimony I ever heard, Howard Storm, he had a life review, and he got to this point in his life review where he came home and something was going on. He was mad at his dad, and his dad walked in the door and he got on him, and they got in a big fight. And in his life review, he saw it from his dad's perspective, who had a horrible day at work, and his boss was yelling at him, and he just wanted to come home and relax and spend some time with his family. And he walks in the door and his son starts getting on him. So you see it from the other person's perspective. Or, one guy gets in a fight. He was kind of a bully, and he beat this other guy up. And when he went in his life review, he was the other guy. Felt his nose break, his teeth break, felt the shame of being beaten up in a fight. And so there's no judgment. I mean, I remember this one guy's life review. He killed another person. And of course, he's all upset. He's with these angels that are watching, and they stop and they say, well, what's wrong? And he goes, what do you mean, what's wrong? I just killed a guy. And he says, no, you're doing fine. He goes, Fine. What, are you crazy? I killed another person. Like, well, he's not really dead. He's up here. He'll go back. You can't really end a life. So they kind of have a different view of things. And there's no judgment. There's no like, you did this right or wrong. It's just like, well, this is how you made them feel. This is how they felt in reaction to what you did. And the lesson is real clear. When we are loving people, kind and considerate of others, it makes all of heaven happy. And when we're cruel or selfish and manipulative, they're kind of disappointed that we didn't choose the path of love. There's no judgment, but it's just like a missed opportunity. You had that chance to show love and you didn't. And of course, the most important is love to our enemies or to those who our ego judges don't deserve our kindness. That's what's most important to heaven. And so the lesson I get from a life review is, number one, there's no revenge. Whatever I do to another person, I'm going to feel it in my life review. And number two, it's really important to consider the way we treat others. If you think about it, we don't have giant sharp teeth. We don't have big claws. We're not particularly good runners. An average jaguar can run up to 70 miles an hour. What made us the dominant species on the planet? It wasn't just raw intelligence. It was our ability to cooperate with each other. There's something called the vagus neuron or the reflexive gene, and that means when you see somebody committing an act of compassion to another human being, just watching somebody be compassionate and loving, your heart wells up and you get this feeling, right? And it produces, feel-good chemicals in your body. Well, that's built into our DNA. That's the universe telling us we were meant to be a community, to cooperate, to love each other, to be our brother's keeper. It's designed into the way we're built genetically. And so that's the lesson of the life review, because down here on Earth, we have the illusion of separateness, but it's just an illusion. We're more connected than separate.
Beautifully put, David. Beautifully put. Is there any NDE in particular that sticks out to you? I mean, you've listened to so many. Is there any that is just like, whoa, either the lesson that was taught in that you can think of right now, or just the sheer, I've heard some wild ones. When I say I've heard some pretty intense ones, I've heard some very simple ones. Is there anyone that you can think of that is like, whoa?
Two of my favorites are Howard Storm's testimony. That's, of course, the first one I ever heard. This militant atheist, he finds himself in the afterlife in a dark place, kind of being tortured by these negative entities. He calls out to heaven for help and gets rescued. And he comes back and he becomes a pastor in the United Church of Christ. So he totally changed his life. And my other favorite one is Kathy Jordan. Her book, I believe, is The Birth Called Death. I think she's still alive, living out in Los Angeles. But when she was 7 years old, she had a fever. Her brother, who had died in the Vietnam War at the age of 17, came and got her. And after that first NDE, he came many nights and took her to heaven, and they learned a lot of stuff. So that's a good read, her book. Howard Storm's book is My Descent into Death, but those are two of my favorites. And I really love Kathy Jordan's book because it was just so positive, and there were just so many interesting little details and lessons I learned that I didn't hear anywhere else until much later in my NDE research.
I haven't heard that one, so I'm gonna have to look it up. I'll definitely do that. Let's pivot a little bit into hell, because this confuses me. I don't understand, Dave, at all. When I heard in your book, and I guess I heard it one other time, and I spoke about it in a previous podcast, where people talk about being careful about who you channel in or medium. Like, you have to kind of set the intention. You don't want any, riffraff coming through. And I was like, I don't understand that, because isn't it only love on the other side? Like, I don't understand. Hell, is it a transition place almost? And you made it very clear in the book, by the way, that it's, even the Nazis seem to go to, so it's a very small amount of people that seem to go there. But I don't know. I guess I was left a little confused on, so hell is real.
Oh, sure. If you want to call it that. I mean, in the big scheme of things, there is no heaven and hell. There's just countless number of realms created by the collective group of souls that are in those realms. I mean, if you went out to California and you visited Beverly Hills, you would call it heaven. Yeah, and then if you drove over to Watts or Compton, you would call that hell. Or the slums, Skid Row in downtown LA, you would call that hell. Well, they're just neighborhoods. And so I'm not real clear about why these negative realms exist. But I know they're not punishments. They're not permanent sentences. When a person is ready, they always come home. 100% of the time, and this is something I heard from another NDE researcher fairly recently, 100% of the time, every single person who's in a hellish NDE and calls out to heaven for help, they always get rescued. Never heard a single case where they didn't get rescued. And so, I hear this theme over and over again in my NDE research, and that is there is a perfect plan of creation, and it's working itself out in its perfection. So there must be some sort of growth or spiritual benefit to have the illusion of partial or complete separation from God. And when you separate yourself completely from love, all that's left is fear. So maybe it's like, how do you appreciate good food? We'll go 3 days without eating. It doesn't matter what you eat. It's going to taste really good. I remember when I went 2 days without eating, and the first thing I ate was a piece of wheat bread, dry, no butter. And I hated wheat bread back then. That was one of the best darn meals I ever had, And when we separate ourselves completely, probably strengthens that connection. What happens when you're separated from a loved one for a couple of months? They go away on a 2-month work thing, and they come back. It's not like if they go to the store and come back. Oh, hey, Janet, how did it go at the store? No, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. And there's this big hug. So maybe that's it. I don't know. But I know that you get attracted to those places because that's your vibration, that's your mindset. And you don't have to stay. And it's always a temporary experience. When the soul's ready, they all go home.
Got it. Do you think it's a blessing or a curse that we don't remember our previous pastimes? Like when you come into this lifetime, what's your view on that? Blessing or curse?
Well, you can't remember too much about the afterlife or your previous lifetime because then it would be too easy. Yeah.
Be like playing a video game with all the cheat codes on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
like it's fun at first, then it gets boring. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's not a challenge. So without challenge, there's no growth, no pain, no gain. Yeah. So we have to challenge ourselves. If we were too connected to other lifetimes with all those experiences, it wouldn't be much of a challenge. Now, the veil is thinning. And so...
Yeah, so what does that mean? Talk to me about that. I've heard that from, obviously, podcasters, people talking about it. It's probably evidence the amount of NDE channels popping up and spiritual podcasts. What does this mean to you, the veil is thinning?
It means that illusion of separateness is lessened. And that's part of the natural progression. So you take on a complete separation or the illusion of separation, and then you kind of find your way back. And we're kind of finding our way back. And as this happens, we'll become an ascended species, and we'll learn to live with each other in the environment in peace and harmony. And then it won't be a big challenge like it is now. And it'll be some other planet in this galaxy that's going to take on the fear-love duality and do the hard lessons. It won't be us. So, we pass on the job to the next planet.
Is this the hardest planet to be at? Because you mentioned that in the book. You said people are watching us, and this is...
Yeah.
I want to say you used the term granddaddy. Maybe that's where it came from with me. But you said this is the big... this is the big show.
Yeah, it's the Mount Everest of physical incarnations. I've heard that over and over again. It's the hardest planet in this galaxy in which to incarnate into. So you don't start in like a new soul that's just incarnating. You don't start on planet Earth. That's just like a new child that's beginning to walk. You don't start by climbing up Mount Everest. You walk across the living room with your parents holding your hands, and then you work up to a hard place. So newer souls will start on peaceful, benevolent planets that are already living in peace and harmony, like the Pleiades, for instance. And then they'll work their way up to Earth. Now, I only heard from one testimony. So, unless I've heard something a dozen times from 12 different sources, I'm not real comfortable taking it on as a belief. But this one, I suspect it's true. There's only 3 planets in the galaxy. In the universe as hard as Earth. So now if you're here, it means you're an expert soul. You're like a daredevil soul who likes adventure and takes on the granddaddy of all challenges. You're like those guys that they put on a flying suit and they jump off and they go through a hole in the mountain and you just go, whoa, those guys are nuts. That's how heaven feels about us.
You're a Red Bull
they think we're the brave ones and, yeah. So we're looked at as the brave daredevil souls that are doing the hard work for creation.
That's super interesting. I love it. Gosh, it makes you feel about the people who are like feeling totally down on themselves though, right? Like, oh man, this is like too hard. It's almost, It's almost like you think you're ready, right? And then you get here and the game is much different than practice. And you're like, oh gosh, what did I do? This is crazy. Um,
Yeah, and that happens too. You did like this pre-Earth planning where you plan out the major events,
mhm.
and what's real common is the soul wants to take on more challenges than they can
Oh,
handle,
I'm sure. You're like, yeah,
the
that happens
elders,
at
yeah,
15. Sounds good. Let's do that. And then by 20, I'm doing that. Let's run and add it up, add it up. And
I want to
then
deal
you
with
get
drug
here.
addiction and physical abuse
Yeah,
and
no
mental
problem.
conditions and on and the guides, like the older guides who help you plan your life, they're like, oh, let's keep a reasonable amount of things. They never let you take on so many challenges, that you're going to obviously fail. We're never allowed to take on challenges that we're incapable of overcoming, and some people take on a lot.
Okay.
So, and the more challenges you take on and the more difficult your life is, the more progress you make in a short amount of time. So, a lot of things that we look at as complete failure is a great success to heaven. I remember this one guy, he was a businessman and he died. He goes through his life review. And they're explaining this to him, like what you see as a great success to us sometimes is a big failure. And what you see as a big failure to us is a great success. And he said, well, what do you mean? So they said, well, we'll show you. And they bring him back down to earth. Now he's in a spirit form, so nobody can see him. And they take him in front of his office building, where he used to work every day. And they showed him this bum, this alcoholic guy. And Angel says to him, what do you see? He goes, well, that's just the alcoholic guy that was always outside of the building, asking people for money. Failure in life. Guy's been drinking. He can't get out of his addiction. It's just a sad failure. And they said, okay, let us show you who this guy really is. And they showed him his spirit. And he was this huge, pure, angelic soul that had chosen to have this difficult lifetime to teach the businessmen coming out of this building about compassion.
Wow.
So it's not always as we see here on earth. And for anybody watching this, just because you're struggling, that does not mean you're failing. That's an earthly concept and is not heaven's concept.
It's so fascinating. And it does feel like more and more people are starting to come around to this. Although there's been a resurgence here, I would say, in religious, I don't know, it feels like there's a little burst here of that coming back. But from your view, too, religion's neither good nor bad either, right? It is a good path for some people to get close to God. I think you said that as well in the book. Like the best religion for you is the one that brings you closest to God. I wrote that down, highlighted it, loved that you said that.
Yeah,
Right?
and that's the answer they always give. And the people who say, well, what about my, we mentioned this earlier, what about my friend or spouse or mother or father who doesn't believe in this? I think, well, leave them alone. They're where they're supposed to be in that religion. So how does God see religion? Well, some people need or prefer the structure of organized religion to connect with God, right? I can't cook worth a darn unless I follow a recipe. My wife doesn't use a recipe. She's a great cook. I need the structure of that recipe. And a lot of the rules of the religions and all that they have that aren't really God's rules, a lot of those rules are well-intentioned. Like the Catholics, I was taught in school, the nun, I remember sitting there in 8th grade, and the nun says, you boys, don't you even think about sex. If you think about sex, you're going to hell. And the boys are sitting there, oh, I'm screwed. It's all I ever think about. Well, the reason they had that rule that you're supposed to stay celibate till marriage and all that is because turns out when you have sexual relations with another person, you take on a little bit of the energy of who they are and they take on a little bit of your energy. Well, do you want to mix energies with a bunch of people that you don't know that well? Probably not. So even things like that, the rule is well-intentioned. But I believe the way God sees religion is the same way a parent would see their child's. Maybe a parent's got 3 children. And one of them expresses love by just walking up to mom and giving her a big hug and telling her, I love you, mommy. And another one expresses love by doing a drawing and saying, look, mommy, I made this drawing for you. And the third one says, mommy, I want to help you wash the dishes. They all express love in a different way. And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing to a parent. And I think the world's major religions, with their traditions and their ceremonies and their beliefs, connecting to and honoring God in different ways is beautiful to God to see all the different ways they do it. I think he enjoys the way his children connect with him and express love.
Yeah, super cool. Do you think people are constantly coming back trying to learn the same lesson? Like, if you fail in this life, is it like when you go back, have you heard anything about coming back to this one and redoing that exact same lesson? Do you just run it back? Or sometimes do you think you maybe pivot, do a less,
Oh
less
yeah,
hard of a
first you
lesson?
don't succeed, try again, right?
How many lives do you think we've lived though? When you say the school is like, do you have any concept of that? Like whether it's hundreds,
Yeah,
are we talking about thousands? Are we talking about how many times have we done this?
I've only heard this from one source, but the average human being, there isn't a human being on Earth right now who's had less than 400 lifetimes.
Whoa.
And if you were to add up all the lifetimes on this planet and other planets, the average human being is older than 1,000,000 years. But then, there's no time in the afterlife, so that doesn't really have any meaning. But if you add up the temporal years, yeah, over 1,000,000 years old. And then, of course, people who are light workers on this planet, the kind of people that would start a channel like yours, they're more teachers. They're kind of the more advanced ones of the super advanced souls on Earth. Those have probably had 3 or 5 million years built up. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I was thinking along the lines of like 10, David. I was like, all right, 10 seems like a decent amount to like figure things out.
No, we've been doing this for a long time. So
Oh, cool.
if you think about it, it's the ultimate virtual reality, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Because, let's say we get really good with our VR headsets where you put them on and it's indistinguishable from this reality. Well, what would be missing? What would be missing is you still know you're in a simulation. Like if you want to fight in World War II and know what it's like to be a soldier, you're not going to be scared of the bullets. You're sitting in your living room with a pair of VR glasses on. So the missing element is amnesia. If you want to have a really good virtual reality experience, you got to really believe you're that person. Then it becomes the ultimate adventure, doesn't it? Well, what do you think we're doing here? And that's what we're doing. It's the ultimate VR.
Wow.
So just like a human being likes to leave the comfort of their home, home's got all the comforts. I got air conditioning, heating, a big lazy boy, a nice big screen TV. I got plenty of food, water, hot water showers. I've got all the comforts and conveniences that I want. I am perfectly comfortable here. It's a nice place to be. Do I want to spend 24/7 and never walk out my front door? No. Well, if I go out for a week-long hike in the mountains, I'm going to suffer putting the 60-pound backpack on, and I'm going to sweat, and my legs are hurt, and I'm going to have challenges. But human beings like to do that. We like to leave the comfort of home to have a challenge. So just like a human being likes to watch a really good movie or read a good book or maybe travel to another country to have a different experience, souls will leave the comfort and joy and perfection of heaven to come down and have earthly experiences and incarnate into lifetimes to have fun, to learn lessons, to grow, to mature. And then when you mature, it's not like a reward. It's more like access. If you want to see the best views in the world, you've got to be an expert hiker. If you can't walk more than a mile, you're going to be limited in the views you can see. Same with your vibration. You raise your vibration, and then you can access the more beautiful and glorious and marvelous and blissful levels of heaven. So when you go home, there's a reward because you'll have access to those higher levels by raising your vibrations. So yeah, there's a lot of purposes to it. But the main ones are we're supposed to learn about love and we're supposed to have fun doing it.
Very cool. Okay, let's say you and I are chilling in heaven. We're watching a movie. And you're like, I'm going to go experience what it's like on Earth. I have this itch. I got to go learn this lesson, raise my vibration. You get up and leave. You come back because there's no time. Is it like you went to the bathroom and came back and you're like, all right, 90 years later, I learned a lot while I was there. Like, there's no time,
it's
right?
It's kind of like the blink of an eye. Yeah.
Wow.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it seems like a long time from these perspectives, but it's just sort of the blink of an eye. And the vision I was given is like, imagine lying down in the virtual reality machine and they put the headset on and they said, okay, we're going to give you a lifetime as a baker in the 15th century and living in this little medieval town. And you close your eyes and they say, ready? And they say, yeah. And they press the button. And the second they press the button, I open my eyes and go, I'm back. Oh my gosh, I'm not, I lived an entire lifetime.
Dang,
and then,
that's
but
crazy.
to you, who put the headset, it just seems like a split second. And that's how it is to them. Yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating.
It's kind of odd. It's kind of
trippy.
Yeah.
It is trippy.
Kind of trippy.
It is trippy. Okay. I'm picturing that moment, what that's probably like when you actually open your eyes and go, oh, I knew it. Like maybe you're getting close to feeling like this thing isn't real. That movie, The Matrix, it hit different. I knew there was something to that. And then you wake up, you're like,
Yeah,
no, no. Like, I
that's
wonder,
good
yeah, it's,
analogy. Yeah, kind of like Neo in the Matrix, exactly.
yeah. Another thing I thought that was fascinating, I only heard it from you, is that you said there's work on the other side, which makes sense, I
Yeah, they're very
guess.
busy. They're very busy in heaven,
But
but
jobs.
the work isn't like work here. So
Hmm.
we have this fine line between work and play, work and leisure time. You do your 8 to 5 job where you probably wouldn't go if you were a billionaire. You'd probably quit, you know? And then you come home and now this is my time and I'm going to do what I want. Well, there is no division between work and play in heaven because you're always doing what you love to do. So there's some people that if they didn't get paid for their job, they love it so much they'd do it anyway. Maybe a teacher, an artist, or something like that. And that's the way it is up there. So they report being very busy, but it's not like a stressful busy. It's a busy like when you go on vacation. It's like you put this list together, all the stuff you want to do, and you're having the time of your life, but you're busy because I want to see this and I want to go over there and do that and I want to get this great restaurant, and so it's that kind of thing. They report being very busy in heaven, but it's a fun kind of busy.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay. All
yeah,
purposeful work, all stuff you
yes.
like doing. Okay. How about the concept of living multiple lives at once? Have you come across anything around that? Because that's interesting to me too, where you, at least correct me if I'm wrong, when they talk about your higher self, this is the version of you that has, let's say, 10 other, probably not named Jordan or Segi in that lifetime, but 10 other versions of my soul are in these different times, different lives, different journeys, all kind of living at the same, going on at once. Is that kind of how it is? And so I'm here right now talking to you, but there's another version of my soul in another life, and all of them affect each other. Is that kind of
That's my understanding. Yes. So, sometimes if I talk about some kind of far out stuff like Pleiadians contacting Gene Roddenberry, giving him the
I
idea
heard
for
you say
Star
that,
Trek.
Dave, and I was like, I don't know what he meant by that. I'm just gonna let that slide.
So when I talk about some crazy stuff like that, somebody will put a comment and say, "This guy's not all there." They're correct. When a soul advances to the point where they're ready for a lifetime on Earth, toughest planet in the galaxy, you got to be advanced. And your energy at that point is so big that you cannot fit it into a human body. It would burn up, burn to a crisp. So we do kind of the same thing God does as part of creation. So God separates or gives the illusion of separation or focuses his attention to this one part of himself, and it becomes an individual, you or me, a soul. We do that. We kind of separate a portion of our energy and it goes down to earth. Most of us is on the other side of the veil. And then, of course, from our earthly perspectives, we have our past lives we've already lived. We have the life we're living right now. And then we have yet to live these future lives. Well, there's no time in heaven. So, and this is a hard one for me to swallow, but this is what I hear. Just what you said. From their perspective, you're living all your lives simultaneously, and all those lives affect each other. And so you'll see this, you'll see a 5-year-old kid take 2 months of piano lessons and he's playing like Mozart. And you go, oh, the guy's got, this kid's got talent. Well, he's drawing from other lifetimes. I recall Peggy Fleming, who was an Olympic ice skater, I think in the 1970s or 80s, I can't recall. And I heard this story, and I haven't been verified that it's true, but the neighbors invited her to go ice skating, and they went on this outdoor ice skating frozen pond back east. And when they brought her back, the neighbors said to her parents, "How long has Peggy been taking lessons?" She was like 10 or 11. And they said, "Lessons? Oh, she's never ice skated in her life." Oh, she was doing spins and skating backwards and everything. She knew how to ice skate in previous lifetimes. And a lot of our likes and dislikes come from that multi-dimensional self. So like
Probably
Lee
fears
Carroll.
too,
What's that?
and
Oh,
probably
yeah, fears
fears.
too. Like if somebody has an unreasonable fear of water, they had a traumatic experience in a lifetime drowning, probably. Or somebody's afraid of flying. They might have been in a craft in World War II as a soldier or something and got shot down, and now they're afraid. Yeah, who knows? But Lee Carroll, who channels Cryon, he was told that he had a lifetime where he was this courier, and it was this mountainous region in cold area, and it was, winter all the time, like in the Arctic. And he was cold for his entire lifetime. So Lee really doesn't like the cold. And that's why, because he had this lifetime where he was cold for the entire 70 or whatever years. So
Cold sucks, man. I'm not for that. I'm in California. I'm not doing it. How has this changed you? I mean, other than the obvious ways you totally flipped like your career and what you do now, but I mean, since embarking on this, what have you changed in any surprising ways? Any ways you're like, whoa, never thought I'd be like that or do that, or what are some other ways it's changed you other than your career? Just understanding about NDEs and
oh,
who
it
we are, I
changed
guess.
everything about me. So, I mean, if the 20-year-old me saw the 60-year-old me today, he'd be really sad. I lost it.
Oh,
What
why?
happened? I went off the deep end.
Oh
You know,
no,
I
that's funny.
became this sort of hippie, tree hugging, spiritual. I was just the opposite. I was this engineer, very logical, very focused, and I was a Christian, but don't you talk about anything outside of the Christian faith because then you're a heathen. And yeah, it changed every aspect about my life. It changed the way I viewed nature, the way I interact with nature. I used to think nothing of cutting down a tree or harming an animal. Oh, it's just an animal. I kind of look down at them. Now I realize they have feelings. It changed the way I deal with my family. It changed the way I just go out into the world on a daily basis. I mean, if I was in a bad mood, I would be cordial in public. But then if you crossed me, watch out. I brought the dragon out and I really let people have it. And now when I'm in a bad mood, I don't have bad moods that often. Most of my days are filled with joy. Whereas before, most of my days were filled with depression. That's probably the biggest change. But I just go out and I'm just comfortable with myself and comfortable with the world. And I just do my best to make the world a better place and make other people smile. And if I'm in a bad mood, I really am careful not to take it out on somebody else, And if I got to do something like call AT&T customer service and I know I'm going to lose my temper, I will tell the rep first thing, hey, listen, I might lose my temper because I've been dealing 3 hours with trying to get this fixed. And please, if I do that, recognize it's nothing about you. You're just doing your job. So please forgive me if that happens. And I got to tell you, when you learn to go out in 5 o'clock traffic when it's really bad, California traffic, I lived there for 40 years in LA. So you know how that is, right? And instead of being like, oh, what a jerk. Oh, I can't believe. And just being this calm, patient person who's smiling because there's this hostile environment and I get to be nice to people for 2 hours. Complete strangers, I get to bring a light for 2 hours in this horrible thing. And I'm smiling about that. Boy, that's way easier for me. It's much easier for me, not just easier on the people around me, to have this spiritual awakening and treat others with love and compassion. But it's a lot easier on me. And I still fail. I still have my down days where I screw up and I do things I shouldn't have and don't treat people well. But we're in this tough environment. It wouldn't be a love-fear duality if it was all just the love side of the equation. You got to play in the dark sometimes to learn. And so that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. Every parent knows long before their child is born, their child's going to make a lot of mistakes. It's part of the learning process.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta tell you, I watched some interviews of you. In the first one I saw, you didn't have any tie-dye posters in the back. The next one you had one. And then now you hear 2025 Dave. I'm like, wow, Dave is changing over there. It's awesome.
This is actually a creation of, I lived in a tiny home in California for 3 years, 10 by 10. It was 100 square feet. And instead of putting drywall up, I covered the walls and ceiling with these tapestries. So when I bought this house, my wife and I were talking. I'm like, oh, I miss the tiny home. She said, well, you should recreate it. So I did. So that's what you're seeing here.
I like it, man. I like it. Good energy, good vibes over there. What are you up to now? I mean, you're spiritually counseling, but what are you up to nowadays? Just doing interviews
Oh,
like
I'm going to
this?
be doing my third filming for an NDE documentary later this year. I'm going to start doing some more work on my second book soon, The New World of Love. I've been working on it for a couple of years, but I kind of set it aside. But I'm still doing part-time power plant consulting.
Okay.
So I'm doing management of 3 power plants in Hawaii. So when they call me out and they say, well, we need you out here for a week, and it's on the company's dime. I'm not complaining to go out to Hawaii. So I really have a blessed life, you know. And it's
That's
so
awesome.
interesting when you start really embracing the law of attraction, how life just kind of flows. It's wonderful.
Can
Yeah.
we end on talking about law of attraction? I would love to do that actually. From
Oh,
someone who's got
sure.
some, give me tips and tricks, and I'll just lay this out of where I'm kind of at. Okay, I've read everything,
All
seen
right.
every movie about it. Definitely, I believe it's true. From my understanding, you need intention without a ton of emotion behind it. Like it's this intention of like going to get your mail. It's certainty. It's like I'm going to get it, but there's no like you don't put anything on a pedestal as far as the goals you want to achieve, like the things you want in your life. You got to talk as if it's there, and there's no because when you put it on a pedestal, you put distance. That's what I heard. I just that's where I'm
Yes.
at. Does that
Yes.
feel correct?
Yeah, so let's just kind of give a brief overview because some who may be
Mm-hmm.
seeing this video may not be familiar with the law of attraction. So, the law of attraction is not a new concept. It's a new name for an age-old concept, you know, and what it means is there's this stuff that Erilym, channeled by Melissa Gates Perry, talks about this in her book, Being Humans, that Erilym calls dark matter fabric, and it's kind of like the building blocks of the universe. And that dark matter fabric will respond to whatever the human being sets their intention on. So it's emotional intention. So it's not like hoping, because hope is wishing you had something you don't have. You're focusing on not having. It's just what you said. It's like, sort of like, I'm already doing this. And then what does that feel like? And you hold on to that. And thoughts and words, of course, have power. So it means that whatever you focus your thoughts, your words, your emotional intention on, it's going to tend to manifest. So there's sayings like, be careful what you wish for. That's describing the law of attraction. The old Latin saying, audentus fortuna innuvat. Fortune favors the bold. Somebody's bold and it seems like the luck follows them. Well, no, it's the law of attraction because they're being bold and they're setting their intention. There's the Bible verse, whatever you sow, that shall you also reap. And I thought that was a threat of punishment when I was a Christian. You better obey God. There's going to be consequences. No, they're talking about the law of attraction. And even the ancient Aramaic word, over 2,000 years old, that's been used by magicians in recent years, abracadabra, that's original meaning is, I will create as I speak. So for the law of attraction to work, you want to use positive words, positive thoughts. You don't want to say, I wish. You want to say things like, I'm grateful for the partner that I have, even if you don't have the partner yet. Or I wonder what it would feel like to have this kind of life. And you're kind of imagining it and smiling like it's already there. And you got to be patient because in heaven, manifestation is instantaneous. And here on earth, it is slow and a long, drawn out process. So it's a lot like those raffles we used to have at my old job. You know, they would have this big meeting and they'd put a jar in front of a bicycle and another jar in front of a microwave oven and another jar in front of maybe an Amazon gift card, and you'd put your tickets in the jar. Well, imagine your thoughts, your words, your emotional intention being a ticket every time you have a positive thought. And the more tickets you put in there, the more likely that prize is going to be yours. So you got to be patient, and it's just like working out or lifting weights or doing cardio. You know, if you do that once or twice a month, it's going to have some positive effect. But if you really want that to work, you've got to be consistent and regular. So you got to be consistent and regular with your thoughts. And now a tip and trick that I like to use is if you have a lot of negative thoughts about something, you know, like I'll give you an example. When I first got married, I had plenty of money for myself. I retired at 47. I had plenty of money for myself, but not for another person. So it's like, okay, well, I got to start working again. And I was looking for work, and I'm in this tiny little town in Texas, and there's no big jobs for engineers. And I was watching my bank account go down, and I was starting to freak out. And through some experiences, my guides just kind of said, you know, you need to calm down about this and start being positive. So I did. I started saying, the money's going to come in. Don't worry about it. So every time I had a negative thought about money, I would say it out loud with something positive. Don't worry about it, Dave. You've experienced lifetimes of poverty and homelessness. You've done that already. You're not doing it again. You're going to be fine. And of course, within 2 months, I got a call from an old coworker of mine who said, I need somebody part-time as a consultant to manage these 3 power plants. Perfect job. Didn't have to give up my spiritual work, didn't have to give up my book writing, my talks, my spiritual counseling, and the pay is great, and I can kind of make my own hours, and it just kind of happened. And the reason why you want to say it out loud is because when you have a negative thought, that's like taking tickets out of the jar. So to say something out loud, you first have to have the thought. So you have all the power of the positive thought, and then when you say it out loud, your ears hear it, and it sort of reinforces into your subconscious. So words are more powerful than thoughts because words have a thought already before you say the word. And then the most powerful thing is that emotional feeling that you already have it. And of course, the best is gratitude. Gratitude is a magnet or a generator of abundance of the thing that you're grateful for. So I'm grateful for this dream job that I have, even if you don't have it yet. I'm grateful for this wonderful partner I have, whether you have it or not, that kind of thing. So gratitude is probably one of the strongest ways to make the law of attraction work in your favor.
Beautiful. Thanks for breaking that down. I'm glad you said patience because, right, let's use me, for example. I'm 33 years old. I have years, decades now of thinking a certain way. And just because yesterday I thought very positive, it's like, sure, it starts setting the intention of the direction you want to go. But then right after that, people give up in a day or two. They're like, it's not working. And you go back to the same thoughts and it just piles on that one positive thought you did, right? So it takes consistency. Gym's a good example too. You don't go once and you're ripped. You got to go
That's right. Yeah, it
you got to go
time.
and go. So I love that. That's great. I guess we'll kind of leave on this. How can people reach out to you, get to know you? I know you have some socials. I will link everything that you gave me. But if they wanted to be a client of yours, can they do that? Like, if you want to, what do you counsel specifically? Like, do you take on anyone and everyone, or is it a specific type of person?
I'm a certified spiritual counselor, and I counsel people who are having spiritual awakenings or people who have had out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences. Having a spiritual awakening can be difficult. You lose your old friends. You may lose your religious group. It can feel very lonely having a spiritual awakening. It can be a frightening experience. So I kind of counsel people who are going through spiritual questionings or a spiritual maturity or a spiritual awakening. And so you can find info about my book and my counseling services at godtookmyclothes.com, godtookmyclothes.com. And my email's also there. So, if times are tough, some people can't afford counseling. At the time of this recording, I am still answering all emails for free. I have some clients who have never had a paid session with me who I've given hours of audio responses. If you send me an email, I'll give you an audio response. I can't type out. It's too much to type it all out, but I give an audio response. And I have some clients who I've given probably, if you added up all the audio responses, days or even a week. And that's completely free. No charge for that.
That's awesome, Dave. I tell people to be careful what you wish for, because my spiritual awakening, the ticket for that cost me $250,000, right? I had to lose everything to finally ask, okay, what's the point, right? And so it really is a journey of going inward. You shine the light on a lot of old habits and bad patterns that you have. It's uncomfortable. It's not this like, woo. It's hard. It's a hard journey.
Well, if you want to grow, you got to be uncomfortable. It's not comfortable getting on the treadmill at the gym or lifting weights,
Yeah.
It's not comfortable. So it's part of the growth process. What does Proverbs say? Sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways. So mine was an emotional breakdown,
Yours was depression, right? You had this whole, mine was financial right before my first daughter was born. Not happy with it. We laugh now, but it's not funny. And it was
not at the time,
hard.
No. Because you can't see what's coming,
No. But I really look at that and I look at the path I was on. I was like, wow, I really was, at that point, I was totally in the camp of like, there is no God. I was like, I was raised Christian, kind of went out of it, and I'd just been out of it, basically. Had nothing. And so when I hit that rock bottom, right before my very first daughter was born, we were supposed to use that money for a house. Like, it was this whole big thing. And it's like, whoa, what did I do? And it really, I had to face myself. And it was very difficult for my wife and I to get through that. But we're here now. We got 2 kids. Just been a beautiful journey, actually, when I look back on it. And I wouldn't have gone on it if that didn't happen. So some people, it really does happen through pain or depression or something. But it's worth it in the end. It's
Yeah, and
worth it in the
something
end.
big like that, you actually plan that in your pre-earth planning. So you plan that for that to happen, to teach you a lesson. You
Yeah,
orchestrated it all. I planned my chronic pain, no doubt about that.
yeah.
And you did it because you're a brave soul. You did it to learn and grow and to help your Heavenly Father and to keep the creation process moving forward and growing. You did it because you love your family. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to go through
Dave, I
difficult
really
times.
enjoyed our combo today, man. This was a lot of fun. So I
Thanks for
appreciate you
having me
hopping
on the
on
show.
here.
I enjoyed it too. You asked very good questions.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. I will link everything in the notes. Hopefully, I'll have you on again someday. I'm looking forward to your second book. Definitely, I'll be on the lookout. I'll keep you posted. I'll buy it, and I appreciate you, man. Really do. Really do.
Keep spreading your light and love.
All right, brother. Cheers.